Welcome to Skytech-Lens. In 2025, the US tried to strong-arm China with sweeping maritime tariffs, $3 billion on any ship with a Chinese link. The plan was supposed to be a precise blow, but it hit nearly a third of the world's container fleet, not just China. Ports worldwide were thrown into chaos, customs delays, insurance panics, and legal confusion. Instead of caving, China hit back with escalating port fees on American ships, signaling a long-term shift. Rather than isolating China, the US pushed it to diversify trade routes and partners, accelerating a plan already in motion. The tariffs didn't just miss their mark, they redrew the global economic map. American ports meant to be protected became the epicenter of crisis. The world watched as the US policy backfired, setting the stage for a global trade upheaval. The ships weren't just rerouted, the rules of trade were being rewritten. The fallout hit fast. The port of Los Angeles, once bustling, turned eerily quiet as cargo volume plunged 25% in a month. Ships idled offshore for days, and blank sailings at Long Beach spiked 20%. Carriers simply skipped U.S. stops. 8 of the top 10 U.S. ports saw imports drop nearly 18% in September alone. 170,000 containers never reached American shelves. Imports from China, the main target, collapsed by nearly 23%. The tariffs hurt American businesses most, $34 billion in losses, higher costs, and a supply chain in disarray. Households paid the price too, an extra $2,400 a year, thanks to tariffs and shipping chaos. The policy meant to protect prosperity was making everyone poorer. The numbers told a story of self-inflicted harm. The American economy was grinding to a halt, not China's. The weapon had backfired. Behind the numbers were real people, like Maria, a truck driver at the port of Los Angeles. She once hauled 3 or 4 loads a day. Now she's lucky to get one, her income slashed in half. Longshoremen faced canceled shifts and layoffs, 15,000 port jobs at risk on the West Coast alone. Small businesses, like a Chicago clothing brand, saw shipping costs soar and profits vanish. Forced to use expensive air freight, owners faced impossible choices: raise prices or go under. In Iowa, a machinery supplier's sales dropped 30% as farmers stopped buying. The ripple effect was everywhere: ports, warehouses, main streets, and fields. Workers and business owners felt betrayed, caught in a trade war they never asked for. The policy, designed to protect them, was destroying their livelihoods. The human cost mounted with every silent crane and empty field. America's economic backbone was buckling. As U.S. ports stalled, Europe's boomed. Rotterdam, Antwerp, Felixstowe, and Hamburg saw a flood of Chinese cargo. Ships that once sailed to America now docked in Europe. The UK's ports surged 30% in throughput. Rotterdam and Hamburg saw a 17% jump. European logistics firms scrambled to keep up, hiring thousands and filling warehouses. For every 1% increase in Belt and Road traffic, Europe gained $3.2 billion in trade. The river of commerce simply changed course, bypassing America's tariff wall. China pivoted quickly, and Europe reaped the rewards. The US was left isolated, watching as its rivals grew stronger. While America fought a trade war, Europe quietly won the trade. The global flow of goods had a new center. China's resilience wasn't luck, it was strategy. The Belt and Road Initiative, a decade in the making, gave China alternate routes to global markets. When US sea lanes closed, China ramped up its rail network to Europe. Rail freight jumped 22% in a year. Over 18,000 container trains crossed Eurasia, delivering goods in just 2 weeks. While US exports to China collapsed, China's global exports rose 8.3%. China simply shifted trade to Europe, Southeast Asia, and BRICS partners. The US tried to contain China, but the world kept buying Chinese goods, just not through American ports. Chinese firms diversified supply chains, making them more resilient. The digital yuan gained traction, moving global trade outside the US dollar's reach. America's economic leverage was slipping. Africa made its own power play, blocking US agricultural imports, especially soybeans. American ships carrying $124 billion in crops were turned away from ports across the continent. The move was a direct response to the chaos in global agriculture after the US-China trade collapse. With China no longer buying, US farmers were desperate for new markets. Africa slammed the door shut. China and India quickly stepped in, signing long-term deals for African-grown soybeans. African farmers gained stable markets while U.S. exports to the continent plunged 58%. Africa was no longer a passive player, it was shaping global trade to its own advantage. The U.S. government admitted the blockade had permanently shifted agricultural trade. The old hierarchies were crumbling. Africa's unified action was a wake-up call. The world's power dynamics were changing. The double blow of losing China and Africa devastated American farmers. Soybean prices collapsed. Farmers lost $60 per acre, spending more to plant than they could ever earn. Bankruptcies soared, with rural foreclosures set to spike 20% if new export deals didn't materialize. Multi-generational farms faced extinction, and rural economies crumbled. Main streets emptied as farmers stopped spending. Local businesses from feed stores to banks felt the pain. Government aid was delayed and insufficient. A temporary fix for a deep wound. Farmers felt like pawns, betrayed by policies that cut them off from global markets. The fields of Iowa were as silent as the ports of Los Angeles. The backbone of America was breaking under the weight of its own trade war. The crisis was total. While U.S. farmers struggled, Africa seized the moment. Blocking U.S. soybeans was part of a bigger plan. Food self-sufficiency and agricultural power. The African Continental Free Trade Area fostered internal trade, creating a vast market for local producers. Partnerships with Brazil, India, and China brought technology and investment. African exports to Asia soared 24%, doubling profits for many farmers. Smallholders joined global supply chains, gaining better seeds, techniques, and guaranteed markets. Local businesses flourished, building resilient communities. The African Development Bank launched a plan to support 40 million farmers by 2030. Africa was breaking free from old dependencies, planting the seeds of its own future. The 2025 trade crisis was a masterclass in unintended consequences. A policy meant to protect America ended up isolating it, wounding its own workers and farmers. The world didn't bend to U.S. will, it simply found new routes. China's Belt and Road proved its worth. Europe became a trade hub. Africa emerged as a confident economic force. The U.S. lost $34 billion, risked 15,000 port jobs, and triggered a farm crisis. Europe's ports boomed, and African farmers secured their future. America's customs windfall was a Pyrrhic victory, profit from its own pain. The U.S. now faces a choice: double down on failed policies or adapt to a multipolar world. The crisis was a wake-up call. Walls don't work in a connected world. America needs a new plan, a new map, and a new way forward. Thanks for watching. Subscribe the channel for more updates.